Thank you very much, Barry, for that very kind and very generous introduction. And hello, Maine Democrats. It's great to be among friends. First of all, I'd like to recognize our outstanding Democratic team in Augusta, led by leader Emily Kane and Barry Hobbins. A long time since our party has been in the minority in Augusta. And I can tell you both Emily and Barry have stood strong for our democratic values here in Augusta, especially when you look at the most recent budget that attacks everyone from seniors to women and children. Let's give a round of applause for all the legislators here. My highest honor to represent you in Congress from the 2nd Congressional District. I remain grateful to all of you for the chance to serve you in Washington, D.C. And it is also my honor to serve with my good friend and colleague, Shelley Pingree, as well. Whether it's fighting for our small family farms, or making health care more affordable, I've been proud to stand with Shelley in the House of Representatives, and I look forward to serving with her many more years in Washington, D.C. as well. Chairman Grant, Vice Chairwoman Mills, and fellow Democrats, I don't need to tell you or anyone here today that the last 2 years have been very difficult for our party. Like each of you, I was discouraged and disappointed with the results of the election in 2010. Like a good Mainer, I gave our Republican friends the benefit of a doubt. I took them at their word that they were serious about getting our economy moving again, that they wanted to cast partisan differences aside for the good of American people, that job creation was their #1 priority, that this time would be different. But perhaps the saying should be, the road to the hill is paved with good intentions. Instead of focusing on how we can create jobs in South Paris or South Portland, Congress spent its time working to pass a bad trade deal that created jobs in South Korea. Rather than working to responsibly reduce our deficits, Republican leadership fought tooth and nail to preserve the tax cuts for the multi-millionaires in oil companies. And right here in Maine, our legislature didn't have any better luck. As a 22-year veteran in the Maine legislature, I have been more disappointed with our Republican friends here in Augusta. Instead of helping put Mainers back to work, our friends spent long, costly fights to make it harder for Mainers to go vote and put up roadblocks for Mainers to vote.
That ain't right.
Instead of working to put our fiscal house in order, Republican leadership in Augusta worked to cut taxes on the wealthiest of our fellow Mainers while slashing programs for women and children. And instead of strengthening health care for our families, the Republican majority actually cut family planning funding for women. And those in Washington are chomping at the bit to do the same. Instead of standing up for Maine workers, they launched assault after assault on state employees, on teachers, and union members. If I learned anything by punching a time clock over 29 years at Great Northern Paper Company, it is that hard-working Mainers cannot be torn down like workers on a mural. It's not going to be an easy fight to win back Washington or in Augusta. We all know that Republicans are determined to keep their majority in both places. And we've all heard it before. Republicans are fired up. The fight will be too difficult to win. That we will be outspent by super PACs and big corporations. Well, when I first ran for Congress 10 years ago, they said the same thing. They said the Republicans were fired up at winning the 2nd Congressional District, that the fight would be difficult for a Democrat to win that district, and that we would be outspent by my Republican opponent, which we were by 2-1. But we prevailed through one of the most nastiest campaigns in Maine's electoral history, because Maine Democrats know something about how to win tough fights. This time, Republicans have put up a familiar face, which will probably be well financed as well. Actually, the candidate said that he doesn't think that my record, as he says it, cuts the mustard. Well, let me tell you this. I relish the opportunity to put my record up of fighting for hardworking Maine families in Congress up against his record of fighting for special interests any day of the week. He's got a lot of catching up to do. If he's going to beat my record as far as fighting for working families. And if he's going to do it, he might end up at Mayo for a little help. But despite the gridlock in Washington, I've continued to fight hard for our values. I've worked to ensure that care for our veterans is treated as a non-negotiable cost of war. The ultimate promise that all Americans have an obligation that we must honor. It is a sad day when caring for those who have defended us have fallen victim to political gamemanship. The legislation that I introduced last year that would help ensure that our severely disabled veterans can continue to receive care through state veterans nursing home has been held up by one single member of the United States Senate, who has placed a hold on that legislation until he can obtain his pet project in his state. That is why I joined several of my House colleagues as a plaintiff on a lawsuit challenging the United States Senate abuse of the filibuster as unconstitutional. Nobody, regardless of whether it's the House of Representatives or the United States Senate, should be able to adopt rules that are unconstitutional. That is wrong. It's hampering us as a nation, and we've seen some of the negative impacts because of it. And as chairman of the House Trade Working Group, I will continue to fight to help American workers have a fighting chance against destructive policy that ships our manufacturing jobs overseas. It is time that our elected leaders stand for fair trade agreements that benefit American workers and do not directly contradict the respect for human rights ingrained in our highest ideals. Every day, our service members put on their uniform to protect the United States of America at home and abroad. Unfortunately, the Department of Defense has neglected the requirement that uniforms be American-made. In this session, I introduced the American Shoes for American Service Members Act to ensure that our troops are wearing footwear made by good American companies like New Balance. In fact, when President Obama came to Maine this spring, I gave him a pair of custom sneakers made at New Balance plant in Norridgewock to show him that this is an easy way to create more jobs here at home and to clothe our soldiers with American-made clothing. And I pledge to each and every one of you that I will continue to fight every single one to make sure that every single men and women who wear the uniform defending our country will be defending our country with American-made clothing. Yeah. This session, I also introduced legislation to help ensure that college students can responsibly manage their debt to stay in and finish school. There is no greater promise as the United States for our future than to make sure that college is affordable. I am proud of my record because it is our record. I'm proud as ever to stand with you, defend it at any time, anywhere, and any place, because that is the Democratic Party's record. Each time that I've had the privilege to address you at a Democratic convention, I invoke the words of an anthem that means so much to so many of us. Solidarity forever. Perhaps the hardship experienced by the workers, that ballad rings just as true today as it did years ago. And so does the promise of solidarity, standing together. We have learned a lot from that song, and I like to quote one sentence. Without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. End of quote. Fellow Democrats, we need your brain and we need your muscle to take back Augusta and Washington. Not only because we are fed up, but because we are fired up. Yeah. So fellow Democrats, will you stand together for good jobs and fair trade? Yeah. Will we stand together for equal rights for all Americans? Yeah. Will we stand together to take care of our veterans? Yeah. Will we stand together for the promise of equality education for all kids, rich and poor? Yeah. We stand together to ensure health care remains a new right and not a privilege. Yeah. We stand together to make sure that our future is decided by everyday voters and not corporations. Yeah. We stand nominee for president who has done more destroying manufacturing jobs than creating them. We stand together for economic opportunity for all Americans. We stand together to take back Washington and Augusta. Let's fellow Democrats join me and let us stand together in solidarity to deliver on the ideals and promise that our party represents. Thank you very much, and God bless you.